What if the ancient myths of Egypt, Babylon, and Greece weren't just legends, but echoes of a hidden truth? In this video, we explore the secret origins of ancient myths and uncover shocking parallels with the book of Genesis. From the Garden of Eden to the Nephilim and the divine council to cosmic battles, these stories may point to a deeper, unified source. Was Genesis the original account, later fragmented into myth by ancient civilizations? Join us as we peel back the layers of time and myth to reveal the forgotten truths encoded in the Bible's very first chapters. Myths have often been dismissed as mere stories, fantastical tales told by primitive people to explain what they did not understand. But this view is not only shallow, it misses the deeper truth embedded in these ancient narratives. Myths are more than fiction. They are vessels of meaning, windows into the spiritual, psychological, and cultural worlds of civilizations. They reflect truths too deep for plain language and too mysterious for history alone. To understand myth is to understand humanity itself, its fears, hopes, values, and the questions it dares to ask about the nature of existence. This essay will explore what myth truly is, why it matters, and how it functions as a container of meaning across time and culture. We will examine the different types of myths, their functions, and their relevance in both ancient and modern times. We will also consider the way myths intersect with sacred texts like the Bible and explore their lingering power in shaping identity, belief, and purpose. 1. Defining myth. More than just stories. At its core, a myth is a traditional story that holds cultural or spiritual significance. The word myth comes from the Greek mythos, meaning speech, story, or plot. While today myth is often used synonymously with lie or false belief, this modern reduction overlooks its ancient role. A myth is not judged by its literal truth, but by its symbolic or spiritual truth. Myths serve as metaphors to describe realities that logic cannot fully grasp. Where science asks how, myth asks why. Why are we here? Why is there suffering? What is the purpose of life? Myths may involve gods, heroes, monsters, and supernatural events, but they often point to moral truths, existential dilemmas, or spiritual mysteries. In this way, a myth is not untruth. It is deep truth disguised in symbolic language. 2. Types of myths. Myths are not all the same. They serve different purposes depending on their context and culture. Here are some major categories. A. Creation myths. These explain how the world and humanity came into being. For example, the Babylonian Enuma Elish, where the world is formed from the slain body of the chaos dragon Tiamat. The Genesis creation account, where God speaks the world into order from chaos. B. Flood myths. Nearly every culture has a flood story. The Epic of Gilgamesh tells of Utnapishtim surviving a global flood sent by angry gods. In Genesis, Noah builds an ark to save humanity and animals from God's judgment. These myths often deal with divine judgment, cleansing, and rebirth. C. Hero myths. These follow the journey of a central figure who undergoes trials, often representing the spiritual journey of a culture or individual. Odysseus in Greek mythology. Moses in the Hebrew tradition. Jesus in Christian theology, though not myth in the same category. It functions archetypally. D. Eschatological myths. These myths explain the end of the world or the transition into a new order. Ragnarok in Norse myth. The Book of Revelation in Christian scripture. These stories reveal the fears and hopes societies have about the future, justice, and cosmic destiny. 3. The functions of myth. Understanding the meaning of myth requires understanding what it does. Myths serve multiple functions. A. Spiritual function. Myths often act as spiritual blueprints. They encode ideas about divinity, morality, and the purpose of life. They present models of virtue or warnings against evil. The Garden of Eden, for example, teaches about innocence, temptation, and the fall. B. Social and cultural function. Myths reinforce a culture's identity and values. For example, the Roman myth of Romulus and Remus provided divine legitimacy to Rome's founding. Similarly, Israel's Exodus story was central to its identity as a people delivered by God. C. Psychological function. Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell saw myths as expressions of the collective unconscious, shared archetypes and symbols that reflect inner psychological realities. The hero's journey is not just a story. It's the soul's journey toward maturity, wholeness, or salvation. D. Historical or explanatory function. Some myths attempt to preserve distorted memories of real historical events. For example, flood myths may be cultural memories of ancient cataclysms. They may also explain natural phenomena like thunderstorms, e.g., Zeus's lightning, or the changing seasons, e.g., the story of Persephone. 4. Myth versus history. Conflict or complement. In modern times, myth and history have been wrongly seen as enemies. Science and reason emphasize observable empirical facts, leaving little room for the symbolic richness of myth. But myth and history answer different questions. History tells us what happened. Myth tells us what it means. For example, the story of Genesis 1 is not structured like a modern scientific account of cosmology. Its purpose is not to explain how the universe formed in physical terms, but why it exists at all, and what role humans play in the cosmic order. Many ancient cultures made no sharp distinction between history and myth. Sacred history was both true and meaningful, even if not literal in the modern sense. 5. Myth and the Bible. Competing voices or divine echoes. Some people assume that the presence of similar myths in different cultures undermines the Bible's authority. For example, the existence of other flood myths is sometimes used to argue that the Noah story is just a Hebrew version of a shared legend. But this view misses the possibility that the truth came first, and the myths are distorted echoes of that truth. According to this view, Genesis preserves a purified version of primeval events. Other cultures carried fragmented memories, reshaped by polytheism and mythology. In this light, the Bible may not be one myth among many, but a divinely preserved memory of spiritual realities that once echoed throughout ancient history. 6. Myths as living narratives. Myths are not relics, they are living narratives. Even in the modern world, we still rely on mythic patterns. Superheroes, for instance, are modern gods. Stories like Star Wars or The Matrix follow mythic structures deeply rooted in ancient storytelling. Political movements, national identities, and even marketing campaigns often rely on mythic language. The chosen one, the enemy, the great struggle, the promised land. These tropes connect us to deeper longings for justice, freedom, purpose, or transcendence. Religious rituals, holidays, and traditions also carry mythic weight. The resurrection of Christ, celebrated at Easter, is not just a historical claim. It is a mythic proclamation of victory over death, hope renewed, and cosmic restoration. 7. The inner journey, myth as mirror. Perhaps the most powerful aspect of myth is that it reflects not just external truths, but internal ones. Myths are mirrors. The Garden of Eden is not just a lost paradise. It's the human condition, our longing for innocence, our fall into self-awareness, and our exile from unity with the divine. The Tower of Babel is not just ancient architecture. It's the story of pride, ambition, and the chaos of human disunity. The flood is not just an ancient event. It represents judgment, cleansing, and the hope of new beginnings. Each of us lives out myths. We play roles, face dragons, fears, trials, and seek our own promised lands. 8. Redeeming the word myth. Because the word myth has been so often misunderstood, it's important to reclaim it, not as a synonym for false, but as a term for sacred story. When Christians say the resurrection is not a myth, they usually mean it's not false. But what if it is a myth, in the truest, most sacred sense? A story of divine truth, real in history, and meaningful in every soul? C.S. Lewis, once an atheist, came to faith through this realization. He called the gospel the true myth, a story that not only sounds like the old myths of dying and rising gods, but one that actually happened in space and time. Myth as the language of the soul. Myths are not lies. They are the symbolic language of the soul, rich with meaning, power, and truth. They help cultures remember who they are. They help individuals understand who they are becoming. They guide us through life's mysteries and point us toward the divine. To dismiss myth is to lose sight of wonder. But to understand myth is to begin to see the world not as a machine, but as a sacred story. In the end, myth and meaning are inseparable. Myths carry the meaning of life, even when life seems incomprehensible. And perhaps that's their greatest gift, to reveal that beneath all chaos, there is a deeper order, a divine purpose, and a truth that transcends time. Genesis versus other creation stories, a deep comparative exploration. For centuries, creation stories have served as the backbone of civilizations. These narratives provide more than answers to cosmic questions. They reveal the worldview, values, and spiritual understanding of a people. Among these, the Genesis creation account from the Hebrew Bible stands out for its monotheistic, ordered perspective. But Genesis does not exist in a vacuum. It arose in a world filled with other rich, symbolic, and sometimes strikingly similar creation stories. From Mesopotamia's Enuma Elish to Egyptian cosmogonies, Greek myths, and Hindu cosmology. This essay explores how Genesis compares to these ancient stories, not to undermine it, but to illuminate its distinct voice. What do the similarities suggest? And more importantly, what sets Genesis apart? 1. Overview of the Genesis creation account. The book of Genesis, specifically chapters 1 and 2, presents two perspectives of creation. Genesis 1. God Elohim creates the universe in 6 days and rests on the seventh. The process is orderly, structured, and marked by repeated phrases like, "And God said, and it was good." Genesis 2 focuses more on humanity, describing the formation of Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, and the relational nature of human existence. Key features: monotheism. One sovereign God creates everything. Order from chaos. Darkness and formlessness give way to light, land, and life. Imago Dei. Humans are made in God's image, unique among creatures. Purposeful creation. Everything is good and functions with purpose. Now, let's compare this with other ancient creation accounts. 2. The Enuma Elish Babylonian creation epic. Overview. The Enuma Elish is a Babylonian creation myth written on 7 tablets. It tells of gods born from the mingling of primeval waters, Apsu, fresh water, and Tiamat, salt water. After divine conflict, Marduk, the hero god, defeats Tiamat and uses her corpse to create the world. Key similarities to Genesis. Both begin with chaos, Genesis, formless and void, and Enuma Elish, chaotic waters. Both involve separation of waters, sky, and land. Both accounts move toward order and structure. Key differences. Genesis is monotheistic. A single, sovereign God creates by speaking. Enuma Elish is polytheistic, multiple gods, many of whom are petty, violent, and jealous. Genesis shows no struggle, God doesn't battle chaos. He simply speaks. Creation of humans. In Enuma Elish, humans are created from the blood of a slain god Kingu, to be slaves to the gods. In Genesis, humans are created in God's image with dignity and authority. Interpretation. Genesis appears to deliberately reject the violent polytheistic worldview. Where Babylonian gods wage war, Genesis shows divine peace and order. Genesis presents a radical redefinition of divine human relations. Humans are not slaves, but image bearers. 3. Egyptian creation myths. Ancient Egypt had several creation stories centered around different cities and gods, e.g., Heliopolis, Memphis, Hermopolis. But common themes emerge. Heliopolitan myth. From none, the watery chaos, Adam arises. Adam creates other gods through bodily actions, e.g., sneezing or spitting. Creation continues through divine family trees. Memphite theology, Ta myth. Ta, the creator god, forms the world through speech and thought, much like Genesis God. Similarities to Genesis. Creation by word or mind, especially in the Ta myth. Emergence from watery chaos. Concept of order, Ma'at, governing the cosmos. Differences. Polytheism versus monotheism. Anthropomorphic gods versus a transcendent, formless God. Divine sexuality versus divine speech. Interpretation. Genesis, like the Memphite theology, uses the concept of creation by word, but refines it into a monotheistic, moral framework. Egyptian myths reflect a cyclical cosmology tied to nature and divine hierarchy, while Genesis emphasizes a linear, purposeful creation with a moral order. 4. Greek creation mythology. Greek cosmogony, found in Hesiod's Theogony, begins with chaos, a yawning void. From chaos come Gaia, earth, Tartarus, underworld, and Eros, desire. Successive generations of gods rise, with Cronus overthrowing Uranus, and later Zeus defeating Cronus. Similarities. Starts with chaos. Uses generational succession to build cosmic order. Differences. Genesis has no divine conflict, only peaceful ordering. God in Genesis is eternal. Greek gods are born, overthrown, and replaced. Humans in Greek myth are often afterthoughts or pawns. Interpretation. Greek myth focuses on cosmic conflict and succession. Genesis bypasses this entirely. There's no birth of God, no divine struggle. Instead, God reigns absolutely and eternally, a revolutionary concept in the ancient world. 5. Hindu cosmology. Hindu scriptures like the Rig Veda, Puranas, and Upanishads offer multiple creation accounts. Common themes. The universe arises from Brahman, the ultimate reality. In the Nasadiya Sukta, Rig Veda 10.129, creation emerges from non-being, but its origins remain mysterious. Even the gods may not know. Purusha Sukta describes creation from the cosmic man, Purusha, whose body forms the world. Similarities to Genesis. Recognition of a cosmic origin beyond comprehension. Idea of oneness at the core of all reality. Brahman is almost equal to divine source. Use of sacrifice, Purusha's body, as a means of creation. Differences. Hinduism embraces pantheism/panentheism. God is in everything. Genesis presents a transcendent God who is separate from creation. Hindu creation is cyclical. Genesis is linear, creation, fall, redemption. Interpretation. Hindu cosmology seeks mystical union with the divine source. Genesis emphasizes relationship and responsibility. Humans reflect God, but are distinct from Him. While both affirm spiritual depth, Genesis calls for obedience and moral order, not just awareness. 6. Genesis in its ancient Near Eastern context. To the ancient world, Genesis was revolutionary. Contrasts with common beliefs. Other myths. Gods are many, fallible, and violent. Genesis. God is one, all-powerful, good, and moral. Other myths. The world is created through violence or sexual acts. Genesis. Creation is peaceful, intentional, and spoken. In this sense, Genesis serves as a polemic, a deliberate theological challenge to surrounding myths. By presenting a God who is both transcendent and personal, Genesis redefines the divine-human relationship. Ethical implications. Genesis holds that creation is good. Humans are stewards, not slaves. There's an emphasis on moral order, not mythological chaos. These concepts laid the foundation for Western ideas of human dignity, law, time, and history. 7. Why the similarities? Skeptics often point out the parallels between Genesis and older myths, like the Enuma Elish, as evidence that the Bible borrowed or plagiarized them. However, this view is simplistic. Shared cultural memory. The similarities may reflect a shared ancestral memory of real primeval events, such as a global flood or ancient cosmic order, that were preserved in different forms across cultures. The biblical counter-narrative. Genesis does not copy myths, it corrects them. It removes polytheism and divine immorality. It replaces chaos with purpose. It dignifies humanity. It introduces moral causality. Disobedience leads to consequences. Far from being derivative, Genesis may be the purified source, while other myths are distorted echoes. 8. Theological and philosophical impact. Genesis revolutionized ancient thought by offering one eternal God as creator, a universe with purpose and order, a moral framework grounded in divine law, human dignity through divine image-bearing. This laid the foundation for Judeo-Christian ethics, science, a universe governed by laws, and linear history, beginning, middle, and end. When placed alongside other ancient creation stories, Genesis stands both with them and apart from them. It shares themes like chaos, cosmic origin, and humanity's place in the world. But it rejects mythological polytheism, violence among gods, and humanity's slavery to fate. Genesis presents a unique worldview, where a personal moral God speaks life into being, where humans bear divine image, and where creation is not a chaotic accident, but a sacred gift. Rather than copying the myths around it, Genesis may well be reclaiming the original truth lost in the noise of mythologies. In the end, Genesis is not just a creation story. It is a declaration of divine authority, moral order, and human purpose. And it remains, to this day, one of the most powerful narratives to ever shape civilization. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the secret origins of ancient myths and their hidden connection to Genesis. As we've seen, these ancient stories may not be mere fantasy. They could be fractured memories of a deeper, divine truth. The Bible's first chapters might hold the key to understanding the spiritual roots of global mythology. If this episode opened your mind, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with fellow truth seekers. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What myth surprised you the most? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop seeking the truth beneath the surface.